Okay, Susan, thank you for taking the time to talk. As you know, we've been enjoying getting some of the stories of the very first moments of homeschooling in North Carolina. And so, just curious, when did you first hear about homeschooling or think about it, and why did you decide to do that?
Well, it's funny. I've heard other people say they heard about it on Focus on the Family. So that was where I heard about it. I don't think I knew anything about homeschooling before that, at least not very much. And
Hmm.
I got interested in it. And at that time, our children were in Christian school. So my oldest daughter was in public school 1 year, and we decided that wasn't for us. And so
Okay.
then I mean, even in kindergarten, it was clear they weren't going to talk about God at all. Even at Christmas, you couldn't even mention what Christmas was about.
Oh.
And she was in kindergarten, and they would do stories all through December. But of course, it was all about Santa Claus. And
Hmm.
I said, "Can we at least do one about the real meaning of Christmas?" And they said no. So we said, "Where we're going to the Christian schools."
Yeah.
So from Christian school when we got interested, but the when I heard Focus on the Family and heard about homeschooling, um, it seemed good, partly because of the flexibility, of course. I mean, we all know all the different good reasons to homeschool, but in those days, I had one daughter particularly who was having trouble with her math, and we would spend a whole lot of time at night going over math and trying, for some reason, maybe it's her learning style, she was not getting it at school. And it wasn't that she couldn't get it, she just wasn't getting it the way they were teaching it. And so
Hmm.
we would work at night. And then I'm hearing about homeschooling, and I'm thinking, hey, we could do this during the day instead of being in school all day and then coming home and then we try to teach it. Actually, we just jumped in and started that September, which was um, 1984. We started.
And so, did you have any trouble with that?
Well, yes. There were several things, one of which were my parents. We're telling them they live here in Raleigh, or they did. And so we went over and talked to them, and they were not thrilled. My father was a
Mm-hmm.
college professor, my mother was a high school teacher. Back in those days, nobody was talking about homeschooling, and this sounded like a pretty crazy idea. A few days later, my mother called and said, "Look, you're going to put those children in school, and I'm not going to say another thing about it." And I was
Ooh.
like, woo. And she didn't ever say anything else about it. I don't know if she was really afraid we were going to get arrested. I don't know what she thought, but she didn't think it was a good idea. And so then that year, we got two separate calls from social workers saying, "We would like to help you get your children into school." And we said, "They are in school, they are fine, we do not need any help." But of course, you didn't know who these people were exactly. You didn't know what else they might do. You didn't know if they're going to show up at your door
Yeah.
or what else was going on. And so, it felt pretty uncomfortable, even though in the long run, that's all that happened.
Tell me about your first memories with NCHE getting started and getting connected with other homeschoolers.
Well, after I heard Focus on the Family, and they talked about the Moors, and they talked about the way I remember it, it was um, a curriculum company. So it's really interesting because in those days, so I called, both of these people, and in those days, they just give you names. Oh yeah, we know somebody in North Carolina that's doing that. They give you the name, they give you the telephone number,
Hmm.
which I don't think you could do that these days. But it's like, oh, great. So you get all these names and telephone numbers, you call people, you find out what's going on. So we were not involved in the very first meeting, but we got involved after that and went to other meetings and got connected with people. That's how we kind of got in the middle of it. We ended up on the board, I ended up being the treasurer. I mean, in those early days, this was such a small group. And so people were contributing, but there were very few people and not that much money. And so now, of course, I didn't do the greenhouse, but when it was written, it would be like one page, front and back, single spaced. And we had to save up enough money to do a mailing, because you had to copy it, you had to have the postage.
Yeah.
So, it was a small enough thing that you couldn't even just mail something out to everybody until you got enough contributions. And we didn't have a computer or anything to do with NCHE at that point. Well, I would go down to, at some point I would go to Department Non-Public Education, and their records were public, but they're not just going to give you a list of something because that's extra work for them. So I would go down there and I would, like, once a week, copy down that, I guess they just gave me the sheets, copy down all the names and
Oh,
addresses of
no.
people that had listed their schools, and so that we could, contact these people and tell them about NCHE and
Huh.
tell them about what's going on. So I would go down and I would copy all these names down. And then this fellow at church, Wayne, he was single. He didn't have children. But he was just interested in helping. So he would type all these names into his computer and print out mailing labels so that then we could mail out a greenhouse when we got enough money. And that was, the very early days. We didn't have much money. We didn't even have a computer. Later, we did get a computer. And so then I was, putting the information in myself.
And how long were you on the board?
I was on the board until they hired me to run the office, 1990.
Okay.
So, I mean, I had all the records on the computer, and I, kept up with everything and sent out the greenhouses
And so how long did you run the office?
for about 10 years. And we had about 3 or 4 other people working there.